Okay. All right, good morning and welcome to Webinar Tuesdays. Webinar Tuesday is hosted by the VI Small Business Development Center in collaboration with the Small Business Administration. My name is Greg Kopach. I'm a business counselor here in the Virgin Islands, St. Croix District, and I'll be the facilitator for today's session, which is titled Economic Aid Act Overview for Small Businesses. Today's session is being recorded and it'll be posted on our Facebook page and uploaded to our YouTube channel as well, which can be found at @VISBDC. Wayne Huddleston is the Senior Area Manager for the Small Business Administration in the Virgin Islands, which is part of the SBA Puerto Rico/Virgin Islands District. For today's session, please put your questions in the chat and they'll be answered at the end of the presentation. I now present to you Mr. Wayne Huddleston.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Greg, for that introduction, and thank you to everyone at the Small Business Development Center for hosting these presentations. It's a great help to get the word out on information for small businesses, especially as it's been coming almost seems like every couple of months there's some new act or something with information and resources to help small businesses. So we appreciate your help in getting out the word. As Greg said, my name is Wayne Huddleston. I'm the Senior Area Manager for the U.S. Small Business Administration here in the territory. Today, I'm going to provide just a brief overview. I'm not going to go in depth on it, but because the Economic Aid Act has a lot of information in it. But I pulled out the important parts, especially as relates to new programs through SBA and new changes to programs within our agency. And we're going to touch upon those on each one of them, go over the basics of those programs, and then leave a lot of time afterwards to answer any questions you may have regarding anything we discussed today or anything regarding SBA. Without further ado, I'll just get straight into our program today. Okay, here's the agenda. As I said, I'm going to cover these things. I'm going to start with PPP because that is getting a lot of attention in the media, and that has a deadline which is coming up in just a few months. So I want to make sure to answer a lot of questions there. I know there's a lot of businesses in the Virgin Islands who wish to take advantage of that program. I'm going to talk about EIDL, which is our Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I'm going to talk about how those loans work, how you're eligible, and an additional grant portion of that that is reauthorized with the Economic Aid Act. I'm going to talk about shuttered venue grants. There may be a few entities here in the Virgin Islands who could take advantage of that, so I'm just going to touch upon that briefly. Debt relief, which covers existing SBA loans that are not disaster loans, but existing SBA, what we call 7A or 504 loans. And then we're going to talk about SBA lending changes to our regular programs that will be in effect for at least a short period. I want to, some disclaimers though, just presentation is just an overview of the PPP forgiveness application process as it is as of today. It includes information and guidance from our website and the Treasury website. If you want to read those that information in depth, we have a lot of good links on our site. We have all the frequently asked questions posted on our site, the application forms posted on our site. We also have the full regulations and rules posted on both Treasury and SBA. So I tell you that because a lot of your questions can be answered through that site. Oftentimes when people ask me questions about PPP or changes to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, if they've been asked before, many times I can tell you the answer immediately, but oftentimes it's a little bit more complex. It requires me to just look at the same thing that you can look at as well. I don't necessarily, I don't have the authority to tell you exactly how those rules are going to be applied and to give you specific advice. We are provided this information as Congress passed it, and I'm just disseminating it essentially. But all that information can be found on those sites. If you have questions or concerns and you want specific guidance for your business on how to submit your financial statements, what the impacts of a loan may mean for your balance sheet or your bottom line or tax obligations. You may want to consult with an accountant, consultant, or an advisor, and the SBDC has plenty of business advisors as well that can help you with those. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Paycheck Protection Program. Most important thing I want everyone to know is that program is available until March. Mary Jo, you might need to mute yourself. Okay. That program is available until March 31st, 2021, pending the availability of funds. We say pending the availability of funds because there have been times in the past where those programs have run out of funds. I don't anticipate it in this round, but you never know. So we want to make sure that you know that, but otherwise it's going to expire March 31st unless Congress takes any additional action, which the likelihood of that is diminishing with the approval of vaccines. And as we start to get closer to the abatement of the pandemic, additional relief in these types of forms will become less and less likely. So first I'm going to talk about a first draw PPP loan and what that is. It is for eligible applicants that did not receive a PPP loan prior to August 8th when the program ended. It now includes some additional type of entities. It really included almost every small business, but there were a few entities that it excluded. I'm going to cover some of those that are now allowable. Covered eligible expenses are now expanded. You may remember if you took a PPP loan in the beginning, you had to spend at least 60% of that loan on payroll and no more than 40% on other expenses to be eligible for full forgiveness. And those other eligible expenses were very narrow. It's still pretty narrow, but there are some extra expenses expanded, and I'll touch upon that. You can now select a covered period to use your PPP loan proceeds between 8 and 24 weeks after disbursement. Certain borrowers may request an increase to their original PPP loan, but you must apply on or before March 31st. And that is in bold because if you wait around, you may miss out on the opportunity to get your PPP loan. And I certainly encourage you not to wait until that last week or so. So eligibility, I told you there were some changes to that. Newly eligible are housing cooperatives, what we define as destination marketing organizations, certain 501c6 organizations like a Chamber of Commerce, and some eligible news organizations. All the other organizations that were eligible previously are still eligible. All business entities, partnerships, corporations, sole proprietorships, 501c3, veterans organizations, and tribal businesses, all those are still eligible. So if you never applied in a first draw opportunity or just missed your chance, you now have another chance to get that first draw. So what is a second draw PPP loan? That's for borrowers who received the PPP loan the first time and now are eligible to receive it a second time. There are a few extra provisions for it though. One is that you must have 300 employees or less, and you must show that you suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts in comparable quarters between 2019 and 2020. The formula is the same. So the second draw PPP loan still provides 2.5 times your average monthly salary for 2019 and 2020. The cap instead of 10 million is now $2 million. The difference in this new legislation is it allows borrowers in the accommodation of food services sectors, and it gives that NAICS code there, to have a higher maximum loan amount for the second draw. And that's at 3.5 times your monthly salary payroll, up to $2 million. Those are your restaurants, your food service providers, and other areas. Anything that has that NAICS code, which is what we call the North American Industry Classification Code, is eligible to receive a higher approval amount, up to 3.5 times your average monthly payroll. And then second draw PPP loan applicants must submit the information on a new form, a new borrower application for a second draw, 2483 SD is what we're calling it, when applying through your lender. And all those forms are posted on our site, and all the lenders who process these loans provide those forms or provide the information in their own format, which is populated into those forms for us. As I mentioned, there are some additional eligibility requirements for the second draw. No more than 300 employees, must have at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020, which means if you're using the second quarter of 2019, you must compare it to the second quarter of 2020 to show that there was a 25% reduction. And then the first bullet point I skipped there, it is you must have shown or proven that you've used your first draw PPP loan amount for the authorized expenses. You do not have to have it forgiven yet, but you must show that you have used it appropriately, even though that forgiveness approval may still be in process. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the forgiveness process for PPP. That's really the best part about a Paycheck Protection Program loan, in that it is forgivable. It operates similar to a grant. We're not calling it a grant because technically it's not. It is a loan. And for businesses that don't use the funds in the manner that they were intended, that will not be forgiven. That will turn into a loan. So we are not calling it a grant for that purpose. However, if you just simply use the proceeds for the reasons that the businesses said they needed them for, which is primarily payroll, then the likelihood of forgiveness is very, very high. So there have been some changes to the forgiveness portion of that, though. In the beginning, those who received an original PPP loan may remember that if they also received an economic injury disaster loan and they received an advance, that advance was deducted from the forgiveness amount that was approved. That is no longer the case. So if you received an EIDL loan and you received an advance, you do not have to worry about that affecting your forgiveness amount. That will no longer come into play. PPP loans are not taxable income. Expenses paid through them are now tax deductible. You'll have to work with your IRS or your accountant for the details on that. There are some expanded expenses that are permissible for any PPP loan not already forgiven. So this is a very narrow amount, but you may remember before, it could be used to pay your basic utility expenses and those types of things, but now, or mortgage insurance, but now you can use them if you suffered, for instance, if you received a loan and you're using it primarily for payroll, but you also incurred expenses in obtaining and purchasing personal protective equipment for your employees, or perhaps you needed to move some significant portion of your operations online and needed to purchase the equipment or licenses to do so, then those can be added to that. However, we strongly encourage you, if you can just spend the entire PPP amount on payroll, that is by far the best thing you can do. It eases the forgiveness decision. It makes it less complicated. You certainly want to do that. Spend it all on payroll if you can. And you certainly have a very long window of up to 24 weeks to do so. So strongly encourage you to do that. I need to update this side because I say coming soon. There will be a simplified forgiveness application, but that is already available, and I'll provide a link to that at the end. So just to give just kind of more visual overview of how that forgiveness process works. You get those forms. These are the 3 forms here that you would be getting. 3508S allows borrowers who receive loans of $150,000 or less. Originally that was $50,000 or less, but that's been expanded. So if your PPP loan is less than 150, then you can use that simplified 3508S form. For those that are more over 150, and you're self-employed and have no employees, or you do not reduce hours less than 25%, then it's a 3508 EZ. And for everyone else who doesn't fall in those other 2 categories, you would still use the 3508 regular form. Here's a timeline for that forgiveness. The borrower submits it, again, to your lender. Everything with a PPP loan is done directly with a lender, not through SBA. You'll submit your forgiveness loan application through your lender. They will review, and they have 60 days to review and decide or deny whether SBA should be able to forgive that loan. They will then, they will not go back to the borrower, they go to SBA and they submit that to us. we have 90 days from the time that is submitted to SBA to turn back a decision to that lender. So you can see it may take a little bit of time. So you want to start early if you can. The lender then, once they receive the notice from us, they have 5 days to notify that borrower of the forgiveness amount. In most cases, in the vast majority, it is a 100% forgiven amount, but in some cases it's not. There may be just a percentage. And then they will tell you that amount. They'll give you the information on the review or the denial. They'll tell you if there's any remaining balance due, and they'll tell you what that due date is if that's applicable. The borrower then begins to repay any remaining balance due on the loan before the maturity date of the loan. If a borrower wishes to appeal, if it did not get full forgiveness and it wishes to appeal that decision, it may do so. However, that does not extend the timeline for when those payments are due to that lender. You can get more information on that on the website below. It gives a lot more information on that process. I'm now going to talk about our economic injury disaster loans. You may remember those loans had a deadline of December 31st, 2020. With the Economic Aid Act that was passed, that extended that deadline another full year, all the way up to December 31st of 2021. If you wish to receive an economic injury disaster loan, first remember that these are loans. These are not forgivable. They do not anticipate that they will ever be forgivable. So these will be debt that you will be taking on. However, the terms of these are fantastic. So if you are running into difficulty and need a loan to get by, this is a very good option. You must have been in business. You must be a small business. You must have been in business prior to February 1st. It's a long-term loan. It's to meet obligations that otherwise could have been met had the pandemic disaster not occurred. So for instance, if you receive one of these loans and you have now whatever, let's say you were awarded or approved for the full amount of $150,000, and you see on your balance sheet that you have debt for equipment, or you would like to purchase a new piece of property or something like that, you cannot use this loan for that. That is not for expanding your business and helping you grow. It is for helping businesses get through a very difficult time and help them meet those expenses that they otherwise would not have been able to meet had the pandemic not occurred. The interest rates are good, 3.75% for businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits, and the maturity is 30 years. No collateral is required if it's a loan under $25,000, but collateral is required after that. And again, these are not forgivable. They must be repaid. It is debt, but it's there for you to use if you need it to get through a difficult time. What we are encouraging, what I've been encouraging most people do, is if they think they might need an economic injury disaster loan to get through a rough patch, but they're not sure, I encourage you to go ahead and apply. There's nothing wrong with paying off that loan early. So if you get an approval, you can get that money, set it in your account. I encourage you to set it in a separate account anyway, not commingle it with other operating funds. Just open up a separate account with the bank, stick it in there. And if maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you realize you didn't really need that money and you would prefer not to carry that debt, you can just simply return that money to SBA. And the only cost it would be the minor amount of accrued interest during those few months, which for most people is certainly worth that cost of having that option there for funds to help out. The new act has changes some of the provisions of the EIDL advance. Those who may remember, Congress approved $20 billion in the very early days in March for an advance on the EIDL loans, and that money eventually dried up. So there was no more money and they did not approve anything beyond that. They have now made another approval of funds that is available to businesses who either applied and were not able to get their full amount, or had had applied or were not eligible to receive an advance because the funds had ran out. So there is nothing you need to do at this time. SBA is going through all previous applicants, reviewing all applications to see which ones would have received an economic injury disaster loan advance. And if they are eligible, then they will inform the borrowers of that. There's nothing else that you have to do up front to make sure you are considered for those loans. So they will be looking at that. There's nothing you do, but it is an opportunity to receive those funds coming. I'm going to skip this low-income community. This does apply a lot to the Virgin Islands. So part of EIDL advances, they do confirm that it is for a low-income community. So next, I'm just going to touch briefly on this because there's not a lot of businesses here in the territory for which this is applying, but it may apply for some. This is a significant allowance in the Act for venue operators to receive grants, not forgivable loans, not loans, but grants to operators. Therefore, live venue operators, promoters, producers, live performing arts organization operators, museum operators, and so forth. There's a set aside of $2 billion for entities that do not employ more than 50 employees. There's a lot of provisions of that. There's a 14-day period following the grants can only be awarded to eligible entries that have faced 70% or greater revenue loss. There's a lot of provisions in that. But if you are a venue operator or you are a museum operator, I know we have a few museums here, or live performing arts organization, you want to look into this. There's a lot more information on our site, a lot more detail on it about whether you would be eligible and how to apply. But you should look at that if this applies to you. It was a new provision in the Act that could be very helpful. So I'm going to talk about the extension of the debt relief program. For those of you who had an existing SBA loan, which is what we call a 7A loan or 504 loan, and there are many businesses in the territory with those, and you were just making your regular payments, you may remember last fall that those payments were made for you by SBA. The borrower didn't have to do anything. It wasn't a deferment or deferral of payments. It was actually just keeping you current, but SBA was making those payments for you directly to the lender. That program ended. However, in the new Economic Aid Act program, they have extended that. So now, depending on your loan and the type of business, SBA will continue those payments. For most, it is continuing for a 3-month period for all 7A loan or recipients. And that will continue depending on the type of business for a little bit longer. It's helpful for many businesses. It is not for businesses that are receiving a new loan now. It's for businesses that already had those loans. They're helpful, and I want to make sure that businesses know that that is now being extended for them. So I'm going to talk about modifications to current programs at SBA. So what we have done now, we have our loan programs that range anywhere from 50% up to 90%, depending on the type of loan in normal times. However, SBA has increased that amount to 90% of a loan guarantee. These are not loans that you apply directly for through SBA. You apply for through your lender. And all the major lenders here in the territory are eligible to process those loans for you. However, that extra amount guarantee is significant for a lender. So if whether you have received an economic injury disaster loan or not, doesn't matter. You can receive PPP, but perhaps you're at a time in your business where you do want to expand. You want to take advantage of this opportunity to purchase new property, to grow your business, purchase new equipment, what have you, and you need a loan for that. Your lenders now have a very high guarantee percentage from SBA so they can continue those normal loan processes for you, taking advantage of it. We have an express loan, which is increased from $350,000 to $1 million. Simply, express loans are just easier loans for lenders to process. Our guarantee is raised from 50% to 75% on those loans. We waive lender fees for borrowers and lenders in both of those programs. And we have enhanced 504 refinancing rules for low interest refinancing. So bottom line on these, you don't have to know all the details on these as a business owner, but know that your bankers and lenders who use SBA programs now have even more incentive to get loans done with a higher guarantee, reduced fees, and low interest rates on 504 loans available to you. So as I mentioned, a lot of information can be found on our site. I'm just doing a brief overview of it and then giving time to answer questions, but all of that can be accessed on our site. We have overviews of the first draw and second draw loans, which answer a lot of the frequently asked questions on those sites. We have information on how to calculate your loan amounts and exactly what that would be for your business to help walk you through that. If you want to spend a lot of time reading government language, you can read the full interim final rule number 1 and final rule number 2, which is on our site. It goes through all the details of these loans as passed by Congress. We also have the updated application forms for the first and second draw. And then we have the updated forgiveness forms that have been updated just less than 2 weeks ago, depending on the type of loan you have or how you spent your funds. All those forms are available on our site with instructions to walk you through that process. So now what to do from here. So if you are needing a PPP loan, you should contact your lender. You can use any of the big lenders here in our territory: Popular, First Bank, Merchants Bank, Bank of St. Croix, Oriental. They are all active PPP lenders. Even the Economic Development Bank of the Virgin Islands has done some PPP loans in the past. If you received a first draw loan, ideally you want to go directly to that lender again, because they have your information and you want to keep the process as simplified and expedient as possible. However, if you already have a relationship with the lender off island, or maybe you got your first loan off island, there are plenty of lenders outside the territory who are also willing to process these loans for you. So I encourage you to reach out. You can go to our site, Lender Match, which has a list of lenders on that site. You can also just look out there. There are a lot of what we call fintech firms that are doing that. Cabbage, a few other names I've seen of firms, of businesses, lenders that have been providing loans to businesses here in the territory are available. But highly encourage you to use the local lenders first, as they know the territory the best, and they did a really fantastic job in the first round. I have no doubt they're fully prepared to provide those loans in the second round as well. If you need additional assistance, you can get local assistance here. SBDC is the place I always suggest people go to first. I can provide you some information on SBA programs, on PPP, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and EIDL, but I also fully train the SBDC staff to be fully aware to answer 90% of those questions as well themselves. I'm only one person here at the SBA. SBDC has a full staff. Oftentimes you can get an answer from them quicker than if you were trying to contact me. So take full advantage of that. We also get updates. You can subscribe to our updates at SBA through our website at sba.gov/updates. If you use Twitter, we send out tweets almost every day on just what's happening. You can subscribe to those and receive those as well. And finally, here's my information at the end. My email is below, my cell phone and office number are there. Cell phone is best if you want to call me. However, I usually can't always answer the phone when you call. It oftentimes goes to voicemail. I typically answer within 24 to 48 hours. However, I encourage people, if you need to reach me for some reason, shoot me an email, explain what's happening, because oftentimes I may need to share your information with someone else. It's far easier to do that through an email than a phone call. And then that's our information for our district office and our Twitter account. And then, as I mentioned, SBDC is an ideal source. I encourage you to go to them for information, not only on PPP, EIDL, and other SBA programs, but other issues with your business. Perhaps you're working through some HR issues or some legal issues or financing issues, and you just need help and guidance in your business plan. Contact them. They have well-trained business advisors that can help you with this. Their information is below. Their website is there. You can call and set up a one-on-one appointment, or you can email them and set that up as well. Highly encourage you to take advantage of that. And finally, as we wrap it up and give you opportunity to ask some questions, please give us some feedback, sba.gov/feedback. We'd like to hear if this presentation is helpful to you, if it's provides you information you need, or if you have other suggestions. We just ask a few very short questions. You can do it. It probably takes you 5 minutes. You can do it while you're sitting here listening to this presentation. So please give us this feedback. It really does help. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and open it up to any questions that are out there. And let's see, what time is it now? We have 10:30. So we are slotted to go to 11. I don't think we would need to, but as long as there are questions that are continuing to be answered, I'll stick around. If we spend more than 3 to 4 minutes and there's just no questions and it's silenced, then we'll go ahead and end early. But of course, you can always contact us afterwards as well.
Thank you, Wayne. This is Greg. I wanted to actually ask a question and just touch on a point that you mentioned earlier. Subject is the SVO grant, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. We're starting to get there's a lot of interest in who is eligible, what are the provisions, and we understand that's in the very early stages. I just want to bring to the audience a resource that as early as this morning, I found it, and I found it on the SBA website. If you just do a search for Shuttered Venue, there is the latest document is dated 27 January, and it's a FAQ. It's a series of questions, and these are the good questions. These are the, I am a talent manager. This is what I do. Am I eligible for the grant? I own a nightclub that puts on live music 5 nights a week. Very, very good resource. That's point number one. And the other thing, I just wanted to let the audience know as well that our website, the SBDC website, it should really be a go-to resource. We've got all the links in there for everything from the COVID pandemic and all of its local regulations to links to the SBA, and then everything that we do as a small business development center. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
All right, thanks, Greg.
I don't see many other questions in the chat here for us today. I don't see any raised hands. Well, any other questions out there today? All right, Wayne, we got that block of silence. Do you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay, well, with that then, I think we will close. We want to thank everyone for being here today and ask everyone to join us next week for Webinar Tuesday with the SBA. And by the way, tomorrow is the first of 8 webinars in the series titled Disaster Preparedness and Resiliency. And the first session, the title is, This is Not Business as Usual During COVID-19. It will begin at 2 p.m. And please register on our training portal on our website, which is visbdc.org, or on our Facebook events page @VISBDC. And without further ado, if there are no other further comments, that concludes our presentation today.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you to everyone for hosting. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all.